When you get to the book of Jude, Jude makes an allusion to this very event in Jude verses 6 and 7. Jude is just one chapter. But in verses 6 and 7, Jude writes, "And the angels," and by the way, this is in the Greek, so it's not ambiguous, "and the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of that great day, even as Sodom and Gomorrah, and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire." Jude is talking about judgment on the bad guys. And he mentions among these things, these angels which sinned back in Genesis 6. These angels kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains. These angels that participated in Genesis 6 apparently are chained, awaiting a special judgment. We'll talk. Peter's going to talk about that in a minute. And Jude adds something else here. He makes a comparison between the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah and the sins of these angels, in that they were doing that which is unnatural. Sodom and Gomorrah, homosexuality. We're all familiar with that. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. He's using that as an additional exemplar, lumping the angels with them. The angels went after strange flesh, so did Sodom and Gomorrah. They're both reserved for special judgment. You follow me? You can read it, check it out yourself. That's one confirmation. That's in Jude. Let's take a look at, see, they left their own habitation. We're going to come back to that in a minute. And going after strange flesh is the allusion here. Let's turn to 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. 2 Peter. In Peter's second letter, he says, "For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to Tartarus," it's translated hell in your English Bible, but the Greek word is Tartarus, and it's the only place that word appears in the Bible. I'll come back to that. "If God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to Tartarus, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah," and he goes on. So Peter does a couple of things here. He again alludes to the angels that sinned. They're cast into Tartarus. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. And they're reserved for a final judgment. "And spared not the old world, but saved Noah." In other words, he ties that event to the days of Noah. So he not only confirms Genesis 6, but he also links it to the days of Noah. Okay. The word Tartarus deserves some comment. The problem with this word is it doesn't appear anywhere else in the Bible, but it does appear in Greek literature. It's the Greek term for the dark abode of woe. It is the pit of darkness in the unseen world. It shows up, for example, in Homer's Iliad, where Tartarus is as far below Hades as the earth is below heaven. So where's Tartarus? I don't know, and I don't want to find out. So Tartarus was a term for a deep, special, it was regarded as far below Hades as the earth is below heaven. So it's where these angels are chained until the final thing. Now, if you study classic Greek mythology, you run into the Titans. These creatures in the legends and the myths were partly terrestrial and partly celestial. They rebelled against their father Uranus, and after a prolonged contest were defeated by Zeus and condemned where? Into Tartarus. Do you see a parallel brewing here? I'm going to suggest to you that the legends of the ancient Greeks embody the truth of what really happened in the past, that there were these strange creatures generating hybrids that the Greek called Titans. And we see Zeus in many forms. We see Atlas and Hercules. Atlas and Hercules from Greek mythology were what would be called in the Hebrew Nephilim, offspring of an intermarriage between a god and a woman. And now these legends we obviously see in the Sumer culture, in Assyria, in Egypt. I'll show you a few things. In the Incas, the Mayan, the Epic of Gilgamesh, in the Persian mythology, and certainly in the Greek mythology, which most of us as products of Western civilization are familiar with. Also in India, Bolivia, South Sea Islands, Every one of these cultures, and the American Indians, every one of these cultures have legends of the star people. These people that came, these gods or demigods, whatever, came and cohabited with women and produced hybrids. I discover from some apparent experts in the American Indian culture that this business of holding a hand up saying how, that's Hollywood. But what apparently was the practice when they met a stranger was to hold up the hand so they could count fingers. They had a terror of the six-fingered people. And if you go to the ruins at Chaca, New Mexico, they have one of the exhibits there that you want to take a look at with famous pictographs. And among those pictographs you'll find the fearsome six-fingered hand as part of that. I came across something else that's kind of... The Pawnee Indians have an account that Bill... You remember Buffalo Bill? His real name was William Cody. He wrote his autobiography in 1920. Very colorful guy. You can get his book. It's popular. But there's an interesting quote in his book by Buffalo Bill, Bill Cody, published in 1920. He says, while we were in the Sandhills scouting the Niobrara country, the Pawnee Indians brought into camp some very large bones, one of which the surgeon of the expedition pronounced to be the thigh bone of a human being. The Indians said the bones were those of a race of people who long ago had lived in that country. They said these people were 3 times the size of a man of the present day. And they were so swift and strong that they could run by the side of a buffalo and taking the animal in one arm could tear off a leg and eat it as they ran. I don't know what to make of that. It's in his autobiography. It's published in 1920. I don't think he was worried about UFOs and stuff, but it is an interesting allusion to the Indian legends. In the early country, Ashur, they always speak of the flying god of Ashur. And this diagram you see in many, many of the ancient monuments of a man with a bow, like Nimrod perhaps, and the wings. And you see this on the monuments. Here's an example of them. As you go through Egypt, this is a snapshot in one of the tombs of, I think it's Ramesses II, but you see in all of them. You'll notice on the headers of these passages, again you see a flying disc, again and again and again, as you go through Egypt. You look at the headers on many of these monuments. You look up there and you always see the flying disc, sometimes with a snake involved. And you see it again and again and again. Sometimes you see a person involved with these, and you even find the disc being transported from place to place. So this seems to be something more than simply a symbol of some icon that they're worshiping. Let's talk a little bit about the nature of angels, because that's really at the root of this problem. You notice we learn a lot about angels by looking at the Bible. They always appear in human form. They look human. In fact, many people entertain them unawares, we find out. Sodom and Gomorrah, the homosexuals were after them. That tells you something. I don't want to be too graphic here. And at the resurrection and at the ascension, there's always a pair of angels. And they're like men. They look like men standing there. They spoke. They took men by the hand. They ate meals with them. They're capable of direct physical combat. The Passover in Egypt was by a death angel. In the book of 2 Kings, slaughter of the 185,000 Syrians. One angel after night slaughters 185,000 Syrians. You don't mess around with angels. Now, and they don't marry in heaven. Now that's a phrase. By the way, I'm making a contrast here. With the demons of the New Testament are not like this. They apparently are powerless except to the extent they can embody some person. They're not like angels. Don't distinguish between fallen angels, the bad guys, and the demons. The demons apparently are disembodied spirits looking for embodiment. Angels don't have that problem. They apparently can materialize it. All the way through the Scripture we see them that way. We do know they don't marry. Because the question everybody has, can angels have sex? The Scripture says no. No, it doesn't say that. Jesus says, for in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God. He's talking about that in our resurrection bodies we don't have sex because we're immortal. There is no procreation. There is no reproduction issue. And angels, he's talking here about the angels of God in heaven. I would not speculate on the technologies available to an angel who falls. And that's what we're dealing with here. Now, there's a strange word that gets overlooked by the scholars in general, and I've participated in some translation issues on this very issue. There's a word called okaterion, and it refers to the body as the dwelling place for the spirit. It only occurs twice in the Scripture, and it's very interesting where it does. It occurs in Jude 6, and it's the word that describes what the fallen angels disrobed from. And in 2 Corinthians 5:2, it speaks of, it alludes to the heavenly body that you and I, as believers, aspire to be clothed in. Same word. Okay, I think it's a technical term that's overlooked by the scholars. In Jude 6 and 7, it says, when the angels which kept not their first estate left their own habitation. That word habitation is okaterion. They disrobed from the body that they were given to indulge in this mischief in Genesis 6. The angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness in the judgment of that great day. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and so on. We went through that before. The word is okaterion. In 2 Corinthians 5, 1 and 2, Paul tells the Corinthians, for we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. And for this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house which is from heaven. The word translated house is okaterion. That which those angels abandoned is what we aspire to, that kind of a habit, if you will. Okaterion again. Anyway, let's talk about something else we talked about earlier and mentioned earlier we should get into. Alien abductions. You know, the disturbing thing is there's continuing a deluge of cases being reported that are too weird, too bizarre to take seriously on the one hand, but they're too frequent and too consistent to ignore. And estimates of 1 to 3% of our population have been reported in the professional journals. All the strange episodes seem to involve the implanting or the harvesting of human fetuses as a primary topic. It seems that if these creatures are real, they're very preoccupied with the human reproductive process. And that causes us to wonder, could this be leading to a repetition of the strange events of Genesis 6? Is it possible that this is the hint that is included in Jesus' remark, as the days of Noah were, so shall the days of the coming Son of Man be. Dr. John Max, a Pulitzer Prize-winning MD, he head of psychiatry for Harvard's hospital there, and he's written on this area. He says, the idea that men and women and children can be taken against their wills from their homes, cars, or schoolyards by strange humanoid beings, lifted into spacecraft, and subjected to intrusive and threatening procedures is so terrifying and yet so shattering to our notions of what is possible in our universe that the actuality of the phenomenon has been largely rejected out of hand or bizarrely distorted in most media accounts. This is altogether understandable given the disturbing nature of UFO abductions and our prevailing notions about reality. The fact remains, however, that for 30 years and possibly longer, thousands of individuals who seem to be sincere and of sound mind and who are seeking no personal benefit from their stories have been providing to those who will listen consistent reports of precisely such events. By the way, John Mack has personally dealt with 76 cases himself. He's profiled others. These are people above average intelligence with no prior psychiatric history that clearly are subject to some kind of trauma. And there was a conference on this abduction phenomenon at MIT. And John Mack was one of the co-chairmen of that conference. And he says, if what these abductees are saying is happening to them isn't happening, what is? Saying, what's really going on here? Here's Mack's challenge to the professionals that were there assembled. The high degree of consistency of the stories, the absence of any prior psychiatric illness, physical changes and lesions. Some of these people have scars from the procedures, and I've encountered one myself on that. Independently witnessed by others while the abductions are taking place. There's not many, but there are a few. The involvement of small children is disturbing. Not likely they could be conditioned by, Well, let's move on. The coming to cosmic deception, what's the biggest lie of all? It's interesting. This all started back in Genesis 3. When God declared war on